Welcome to Event Explorer, the podcast where we dive deep into the world's most fascinating events. I'm your host, Daniel Roth, and today I'm excited to embark on a journey into one of the most unique and transformative gatherings on the planet, Burning Man. Now, Burning Man isn't just a festival, it's a living, breathing experiment in community, art, self-reliance, and self-expression. Now, I've always been fascinated by this idea of this temporary city rising up from the desert where money has no value, where art isn't just in galleries, and where the limits are really only those of the human imagination. It's like a crucible of creativity where there's lots of cultural innovation, and it really demonstrates the immense power the festivals have in shaping art and society. So to truly understand what makes Burning Man so special, I wanted to know where it all began. It's fascinating to see how an event can grow from a simple act of self-expression into a big cultural phenomenon that influences art, community building, and global events. At Burning Man, it's not just a festival, it's a blueprint for how we can create new spaces that foster creativity, collaboration, and culture. So, I had the privilege of speaking with Rachel Bowditch. She's a historian, performer, and theater director, and she is an author who has delved deep into the history and evolution of Burning Man. She helps me understand how this gathering started, from its humble beginnings on a beach in San Francisco to becoming the massive cultural phenomenon it is today. Through her insights, we'll explore how this event has shaped and been shaped by the people that participate in it. And then I spoke with two friends, Whitney Hancock and Chris First, two first-time birders who shared their personal experiences, from challenges of preparation to profound moments on the playa and these moments of transformation. Through their stories, I hope to gain a deeper insight into what it's like to be part of this incredible event. So whether you're a seasoned burner, an art enthusiast, or just curious about how this festival in the desert has captured the world's imagination, join me as we unravel the magic of Burning Man.
There's a lot of mythology around it as well.
Yeah.
But I heard this directly from Larry Harvey himself, who was the founder of Burning Man. So he had a breakup. He had things from this relationship, and he went to his friend Jerry James, who was like, God, we got to get over this. And so they just kind of decided in an impromptu way, let's go build a man. So they got scrap lumber from their backyards and just kind of put together this makeshift thing. And they took it to Baker Beach in San Francisco. He brought these possessions from his relationship, and they invited 20 friends, like, hey, come, let's just burn this thing together. And actually, Baker Beach is known for people burning things on the beach. So it wasn't like this super unique thing. But so they brought this stuff, they had their friends, and they poured gasoline over this man, and then they lit it on fire, and it was like this huge kind of explosion. And so everyone from around the beach ran towards this big puff of smoke. And before they knew it, there was 80 people on the beach. And at the time, it was like drumming and singing. It was sort of very typical Bay Area hippie, like let's sing and dance around a fire, which happens probably every weekend in the Bay Area. Nothing that unusual. But it was somehow that event was meaningful. And so the next year they're like, let's do that again. But this time they spent a couple more days building this figure, and everyone who had been there last time enjoyed it. So they brought a friend. So now there was like maybe 150, 200 people on the beach. This was in 86. And so in 87, Michael, who was the member and one of the founders of the Cacophony Society, happened to come to this event. And Cacophony Society was this subversive group of artists from the Bay Area who would do these very fun performative events, like let's dress up in Bastille Day clothes and have a dinner party on the Golden Gate Bridge. They would do these radical things. They had things called zone trips. So they would go off and be like, let's go to this little town that no one's heard of, and let's pretend we're aliens and, explore the town. They would just have these weird adventures.
Yeah.
And so Michael came across this event, and he thought, hey, this is really cool, And so the following year, I think he advertised it in his Cacophony Society newsletter. Like, come they were going to burn this man, this thing. And so a lot of the cacophony societies people started to come. And I can't remember the exact date. I have it in my book, but I'm not remembering now. But at one point, Larry Harvey saw some photographs or some video, and he's like, "Burning Man. That is a burning man." And so I think in the second or third year, they started calling it Burning Man, like come to Baker Beach to see the burning man or see a man burning, right? Um, and then that every year from the first year, it doubled. So then it was 400, 800. And so in 1990, they were spending kind of several weeks building this structure, and it was now much bigger, like 20 feet tall. So they couldn't get it down the beach the regular way. So they started to move it over a cliff, and they were like dangling it over the cliff, bringing it down to the beach. And all of a sudden, the cops were like, "What are you doing? Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't burn this thing on the beach." They didn't have any permits. They're like, "What is going on here? You can't do this." So they literally had to pull the man up. They couldn't burn the man on the beach. So they took it back, but they still wanted to burn the man. So a couple, um, I the Cacophony Society had discovered in one of their zone trips, um, the Black Rock Desert, and they had played croquet games out there. This is in Nevada, and if you've ever been there, it's this white flat lake bed, Lake Powhatan, which is completely powder. So it's not like the Arizona desert with scorpions and cacti. It's completely powder, flat as a pancake, very beautiful, surrounded by mountains. And so Michael and the Cacophony Society were like, "We know the perfect place to burn this man. No one will know because it's so remote. It's just like no one will know." So they went and they found that the man that they had stored had been chopped up and destroyed right before they burned it. So they had to rebuild him right before taking it out. This time, 80 friends decided they were all going to go out to the desert to burn the man. They had U-Hauls and they just kind of hauled their self out there. There's some amazing pictures of the first year where the whole community is literally pulling him up on a string, kind of like pulling him up as a community. So he's just right on the playa. And at the time, so if this is the man being pulled up, people just organically camped around him, right? It just organically formed a semicircle. And they decided not to make it a complete circle because they wanted to be able to see the man with no camp behind him so that it was an
Mm.
open playa. So, but even the very first camp that was there had this natural semicircular shape. But it was only 3 days. It was over Labor Day. And this is where I think Cacophony Society really changed what Burning Man became from just a hippie burning drum circle in the desert, which it could be. Cacophony Society, because they were doing culture jamming and a lot of subversive costuming events. And the first flyer on the 1990 says, "Come wearing your finest ball gowns as we burn the man." So that the first burn was literally this surrealist Dadaist experience where people were in tuxedos and ball gowns in the middle of the desert burning this man. So for me, that's the beginning of this idea of costuming and sort of transforming yourself.
Mm.
Um, Also, the 80 people that were out there, most of them were artists. So someone might have brought a pink flamingo and put it in front of their tent. And then someone might have put a Christmas tree in front of their tent, right? Um, the next year, they're like, "This is Pink Flamingo Camp." And so there's 5 pink flamingos in front of their camp. And this is Christmas Tree Camp, right? So they had these different, um, people started to group together as little tribes, right? Like getting
Mhm.
together and camping together. And one of my favorite stories is Harley Dubois, who was one of the founders. Well, it's Larry, but then the 6 people became sort of the LLC. She had a espresso machine. She was the only one in the playa who had like an espresso machine. So everyone came to her camp in the morning for coffee. And she was like, "Wow, that was really popular. Next time I'll have 3 espresso machines." And then that became the impetus for what then became Center Camp. So Center
Mm.
Camp became the one place where that served coffee on the playa. But it came out of this sort of let's serve coffee. And so it kept evolving. So 92, it was very successful. Everyone who was there The 80 people brought their friends, so now it was 200 people. It literally exponentially grew every year. My partner, Scott Hannon, came out in 93. So he was there when it was very, very small, like less than 1,000 people. And uh, yeah, it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And so one of the people in the beginning was John Law. And so he was friends with Harvey. And they, at a certain point, realized, oh, there's a lot of people out here. We should probably get porta potties. We should sort of, they were starting to realize that some infrastructure was required. But at that point, you camped anywhere. No one paid any money to go. It was totally free. And then at one point they decided we should probably start charging some money for this because we're losing money.
Right.
Um, but there was no way to like enclose the area. So they basically just had a doorway in the middle of the desert, and there was sort of uh, you had to cut. You were lucky if you could even find the door to pay for uh, the entrance fee. And so they were losing money, but they were still putting the event on. Um, then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and so by 1996, the Silicon Valley, uh, .com industry had sort of learned about Burning Man and like, oh, that's the fun event. We should all go out there, So they was starting to get known by Silicon Valley and a lot of people in the Bay Area. It was starting to become a known thing to go out into the desert and burn this man. Um, 96, there were 10,000 people, but
Uh,
still people were camping and it was complete chaos. And that
sure.
was the first year that someone died at Burning Man. And so because there were no rules, it was people could just drive 80 miles across the playa and someone was run over in their tent.
Mm.
Another person before the event started, Michael Fury, was like playing with this motorcycle and a truck and he got hit the truck and he died. So Michael, John Law, and Larry Harvey were sort of the main organizers of the event. Marion Goodall was Larry Harvey's girlfriend, who is now the CEO of Burning Man. Um, John Law was very, I write about it in my book, but felt the event was too dangerous and he didn't want to be associated with it, that, people were dying, like it had
Sure.
gone out of control. Um, and so he kind of stepped away from the event. But Michael, and Larry Harvey were like, no, this event has something really amazing. So then they formed an LLC, and Will Rogers, Crimson Rose, Harley Dubois, Marilyn Goodall, Harvey, and Michael were the 6 LLC members. So when people think that Burning Man is not for profit, is a for profit organization. Um, so what happened in 97 is important because up until that point, they had not been able to really generate ticket revenue because there was really no way to track that because it's such a huge space. 97, they moved off the playa into a private playa, a privately owned area near there. But they were able to have a real gate. And so they came in and they could actually, for the first time, collect ticket revenue. Uh, but a lot of it went back to the police and people who were sort of like, well, we have to be here. So they didn't make much money that year. But they realized that in order for the event to continue, they would have to figure out a way to collect tickets sales. Yeah, and so in 97 and I mean, yeah, 98, they had to get so up until now they hadn't been really getting permission from the BLM. They had some permits, but like especially after the death, they're like that was in jeopardy. So they went to Uh, in order to get a permit to go back to the playa with the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, they had to prove that they could have a safe space
Hmm.
and make the space that could be navigated by emergency vehicles, and that so everyone had to have an address. So that's where the addresses came in, like I'm at 9 in Oblivion or I'm at C and Ego, whatever, so that everyone has a playa address and the roads have to be wide enough for emergency vehicles to go through. So Rod Garrett, who is the designer of the art of the architecture of Black Rock City, which is a horseshoe shape from 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock. and then there's radial streets going out uh, from A to E or F, depending, or G. Um, and those are usually named each year based on the theme. So in 98 was the first year that the real footprint of Black Rock City emerged, which was this horseshoe shape with the man in the middle. Um, and that's how the lamplighters emerged. Remember the ritual I
Mhm.
mentioned? Uh, Someone saw the man and decided, why don't we put lamps leading up to the man from center camp leading to the man? So center camp is always in the middle, and they put
Mm.
lamps all the way to the man as sort of a processional archway. And then that became the procession and the ritual of like, oh, well, how do we light the lamps every night? And then it became, let's make this a ritual and a procession. And that has lasted all these years. And now the whole city has lamps around it. So this inner circle from 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock is called the Esplanade. And that it can be likened to the World's Fairs or, the place where all of the camps around the Esplanade have to have a public facing,
Mm.
open uh camp that serves the playa so that you can come in and so the big camps usually get Esplanade placement because they have sort of the most to offer and then they kind of spiral out. So what emerged, remember, from the Pink Flamingo camp and the is that groups of people started camping together, and what evolved over those years is people started to form theme camps and villages. And so Burning Man has many, many villages of 150 to 200 people each, if not larger. Theme camps have to have a specific theme that they revolve around. For example, my camp is Camp Contact that has 200 people and is all somatic movement practitioners, yogis, transformational healers. And there's 6 domes that uh, that we offer over 200 workshops a week. Anyway, so the event
Wow.
evolved.
Yeah.
Um, Elaborately. And the one last thing I'll say is that in 2001, David Best, who's an amazing artist, he had lost a friend. Actually, no, that was in 2000. And he wanted to build a little temple to recognize this person's life because this person had committed suicide. And the temple was so popular that the next year he built a huge temple called the Temple of Tears, and it was dedicated to suicide. And it's one of those most elaborate things that I've seen on the playa. And you walk in there and your breath is taken away. And so the community started to write messages to the dead on all of the walls. And then that is burned the night after the man. But now the temple has become an integral part of the community. And it's for me one of the most important parts. So I have a little chapter on the temple and the evolution of the temple. Um, yeah, so that just the event just continued to evolve. So when I was there in 2001, there were 30,000 people, and now it's gone up to 80,000. Uh, Although this year we had a dip. So what happened was in 2011, the event sold out for the first time, and suddenly the world had sort of discovered Burning Man, and tickets were very hard to come by, and it became the hottest commodity. It was like Willy Wonka's golden ticket if you could get a ticket to Burning Man. Um, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where, celebrities, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, like they have theme camps out there. They have art cars. Paris Hilton has her own art car. It's become sort of a hub for celebrities. Um, Meanwhile, the whole community is still there, but there's this whole nother layer that has been sort of discovered Burning Man. Um, and it's really the community has had to struggle with that impact.
Understanding the roots of Burning Man set the stage for me to appreciate what makes it so compelling today. As an event model, it's unique in that it requires participants to be actively involved, not just as spectators, but as contributors to the culture being created. This got me thinking about how individuals prepare for such an immersive experience. I wanted to hear about the personal journeys of first-time attendees. Whitney and Chris share how they prepared for this adventure, balancing excitement with the practicalities of surviving in the desert. Their stories highlight the commitment and radical self reliance that are key components of the Burning Man ethos.
Perhaps the best way to term it is blind trust.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a blind trust. I'm a pretty low maintenance gal, so a tent and lots of water, and I knew I'd be good. I brought as many items as I could that, come from my camping world, and so headlamps are necessary, etc., like lots of sunblock, lots. I thought I had to bring my own water, but basically I just looked out. Dan, the camp that I went with, this tea lounge, they've done this. They know what they're doing. They provided a shade structure for us, and we put our tents underneath. And some people are in RVs, etc. But I kind of wanted to get out there in the elements a little bit, so I just grabbed as much of my camping gear as I could and trusted that all would be well. I think had there been a giant dust storm or rainstorm like there had been last year, I we really lucked out on
Nice.
weather. I may not have been as prepared.
Yeah, so I felt like I prepped a lot, like 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks beforehand, and it was sort of checklists on checklists. It's not like you can just show up because there's no and ask for food and different things. That one of the core principles. There's 10 different principles at Burning Man, and one of them being radical self-reliance. And I'm being a prep person myself. I like to be prepared when I go for things. So I had a checklist I found online on Reddit. I think somebody posted a checklist, and the first time I opened it, it was like 300 some suggestions of things you should take to Burning Man, and I was like, oh my god, what am I getting into?
Yeah.
So I've narrowed it down to like I think 80 or 90 things that I ended up like packing, or just common sense things that were suggested. And so I used the list, talked to my friends, and yeah, then I just packed my things and went, and was quite nervous setting out, to be honest.
Preparation is key, but nothing quite compares to that moment when you first arrive at Black Rock City, a temporary metropolis built entirely by its inhabitants. This city is a living example of how collective effort and shared values can create a vibrant community from the ground up. I was curious about Whitney and Chris's first impressions upon entering the otherworldly environment. From building camps to participating in welcoming rituals, they experienced firsthand how Burning Man's culture is crafted by those who show up ready to contribute.
Right. Because I went with the build team. I stayed for the beginning of the trip and the teardown at the end. And you create your block of the city, if you will. So when you arrive, there are no buildings yet, if you will. It's just a bunch of cars and human bodies, right? And RVs and trailers. There's no structures in place. So it is a little, you haven't seen it yet. You haven't seen the city pop up. So it's a little like, this is less glamorous. You just don't know what to picture
Sure,
yet. You're
sure.
like, cool, camping in the desert. I didn't do a whole lot of research. I like surprises. So I did that a bit on purpose. I didn't want to like dive into the internet version of Burning Man before I experienced it myself. So truly watching our whole entire thing pop up, and then other people's structures, and you do see the bits and pieces going up, and everybody like full, mask. We'd had a dust storm in the beginning, so it wasn't terrible, but you have got to like, if you want to look with your eyes, you have to have secure goggles, in order to nail whatever you're nailing together. So I became a construction girl that day for 2 days, and realized like, okay, we have roads, we have legitimate like ways that people move their bodies and bikes and e-bikes and everything here. And so I would say it was just kind of like at first a little anticlimactic.
Apparently I won Burning Man because I came on Saturday like at 10:30, 11 a.m. I segmented my drive into 2 days, and I stayed one night, the halfway point.
Mm-hmm.
And arriving, I was there and waiting in line, and drove in, saw not much yet. It was just like a road saying Burning Man this way, and slowly curving around, and started to see more and more cars. And I ended up waiting for only 45 minutes on an hour, which is not normal. Like people usually wait for 2, 3 hours at a time to get into the event. And as I was approaching the gate, there was a lot of RVs and vehicles, and you could kind of tell like the mood was changing. People were starting to play music, and it just there was this like common thing that I didn't quite understand yet. And yeah, so I started to drive in, got greeted from some gentleman, and he was giving me a big hug and said, "Welcome home," and asked me if I wanted to optionally do a playa angel or like a dust angel. And I said, sure, why not? I'm here. And so I like got into the dust and did the like snow angel thing on dust, and was on my way from there.
One of the most distinctive aspects of Burning Man that intrigued me is its gifting economy, a radical departure from the transactional nature of our everyday lives. This principle fosters a sense of community and interconnectedness that's rare in today's world. As an event model, it challenges participants to rethink value and exchange, emphasizing generosity and mutual support. Rachel explains the origins of this principle, and then Whitney and Chris share their firsthand experiences of giving and receiving in this unique environment. Their stories reveal how the gifting economy not only sustains the event, but also creates a culture of abundance and gratitude.
The other thing that happened in 97, which was pivotal to the evolution of the event, is some people were there trying to sell things like clothing or food. And Larry Harvey was like, no, you don't go to a family picnic and start selling people your olives or your deviled eggs. Like that just goes against the values of the community. And so they banned, that was one of their big rules when they moved back to the playa, was no vending, no selling of any kind. It's a decommodified space.
Mhm.
And they've held true to that ever since. And so this is where the idea of the gift economy emerged, which it was already happening, but they kind of made it a principle that it was a gift economy, that everything is a gift. And it's very different from a barter exchange where you're like, I give you olives and you give me something
Mhm.
else. The idea is like, if I give you a gift, Lewis Hyde talks a lot about gifting as a river. If I give you a gift, a popsicle, for example, and then you drive away, later you're going to give someone else a piece of chocolate, and it kind of, it operates like a river. It's not an exchange. It's not a commodified exchange. So
But
that,
Yeah, it was interesting, right? Like I'm the first day on Monday or so, like the first couple of bars opened up, and I also had a separate gift that I had on my bike. I was called the hygiene man, and I keep you clean whenever I can. So that was like my thing, and I had a little gifting box behind me on my bike that had numbers, and people could pick a number from 1 to 5, and or a mystery gift. And so I would gift things like chapstick and Vaseline and baby wipes and different things that were helping you to survive the environment. And people really liked it as well.
sure.
So I try to give an individual contribution as well because I thought it was important to be part of it. And I kind of felt a little strange in the beginning. Like everybody has like a cup they take with them and a carabiner and their ID, and you just kind of walk up to a bar and they're like, "What would you like?" And you get what they offer, and there's no money exchange, just a friendly like thank you and a hug maybe, and you hang out with that camp for a while or that theme camp or a bar, or even someone's tent, and just say hi, and
Yeah.
you're on your way. So there's really no like money involved, and it's a weird feeling in the beginning, but it's a very harmonious thing. And I think you can't be naive about it. Like at the end of the day, people spend a lot of money to offer these gifts to other people, right? So it kind of balances each other out, I would say.
Yes, yes, yes. Couple of experiences there. I lucked out. My camp, we had like organic yogurt and etc.
Mhm.
Like they fed us pretty darn well fresh fruit. Like I wasn't eating tuna out of a can, and I expected to, and I was prepared to do that. They just said, "Don't worry about food. That's part of what we do." However, we were across the street from a baozi, like bao dumpling camp called Bao Chicka Wow Wow. And they brought us red bean bauza and on like the first night. And I was like, what did I do to earn this? Oh, I don't earn things here. Okay. Thank you. Come back for tea tomorrow,
Yeah.
So, and it was great. I lived in China for a minute and this was a very delicious red bean bao, very authentic. And they threw great parties as well. So, and then the next moment, our people, you know, the people across the way are like, hey, come get a vodka tonic or, you know, and I'm like, I'm gonna have some bao, I'm gonna have a vodka tonic, anything goes here, you know?
I was fascinated to hear about the unexpected adventures that await around every corner at Burning Man. The element of surprise and discovery is a hallmark of the event, encouraging participants to explore and engage with art, performances, and people that make up this ephemeral city. It's a model for how unstructured, organic experiences can lead to meaningful connections and cultural creation. Whitney and Chris share some captivating stories about how venturing out into the playa and the magical moments that they encountered changed them. These narratives illustrate how Burning Man serves as a canvas for spontaneous creativity and communal experiences.
And we're biking and it's like very dark outside and you're just hoping that something good's going to happen. And then I roll up and we do find it and everyone's there and we're waiting on this DJ. It's so fun, like adventure treasure hunt vibes. And there's a big art car here, 10 giant speakers is the Womp art car. And then there's another big giant neon elephant over here, and another rainbow surfboard vibe over here. And I don't know what's happening until like the rhinoceros art car drives up, and the DJ's in the it was Tycho, the Tycho Sunrise set, and he's in the head of the rhinoceros, and all of the art cars. This is at 5:30 a.m. Okay, combine speaker power. My very technical language, and he starts the set, and now hundreds of people are in the middle of the desert at 5:30 before the sun rises, and the sound is like pristine, and the DJ's in one, and everyone's partying on these others, and everyone's partying down. The sun rises, and you're like, this is a movie. I'm living in a movie.
I remember an experience where I was going home after a long day or party, like at 2 a.m, and I was ready to go home. And I wanted to ride one of the streets. They're all labeled A through E, F, and so on. And I was going down one road and decided to go home. And all of a sudden, I was in front of this camp that was pulling people in. It was like, oh, would you like a espresso martini and a spanking? And I'm like, no, I'm tired. But like, I don't know. Like, this is too much. So I ended up going in their huge tent, and they had like a beautiful setup and some good drinks. And I found myself having an espresso martini, and I opted out on the spanking, unfortunately. I'm a little boring sometimes. But the gist of it was that it was a random event. I got pulled in, I hung out, I made new friends. And then on the way home, I saw another person who was like, oh, you know, we do science talks here with horror stories on science, and have a fire pit. Would you like to have a marshmallow and a hot chocolate? And I'm like, please. Like, right. So, you know, you sit down, you have these encounters that are so random. And that wasn't even on the playa. That was just in the towns, like in the different neighborhoods of Burning.
For many, Burning Man is more than just an event. It's a transformative experience that leaves a lasting impact. This transformative potential is part of what makes Burning Man such an influential cultural force. It serves as a space where individuals can challenge their perceptions, embrace vulnerability, and grow personally and collectively. I wanted to delve deeper into how this event changed people. Our guests open up about the profound moments that altered their perspectives and touched their hearts. Their stories highlight how Burning Man's culture fosters personal growth and a sense of belonging.
Yeah, so this was something that, you know, people kept saying, like, oh, you're going to have this big transformational experience and life is never going to be the same, and like you're going to be mind blown. And it was about Wednesday or so, or Thursday, went to the temple, and it was quite an emotional moment. But I said to one of my campmates, like, I'm not having this like aha moment. Like, it's not like my world is changing here forever. But then on Saturday, after the man started to burn, I had this epiphany about life and society, and that was, I think, something that Burning Man, like, I walked away from, was that people just need love and kindness. And I think it sounds very cliche and stereotypical, but there was so much love at Burning Man for people, for events, for each other, and acceptance, that there was no like, what's your angle, or what do you want from me, or like, what's your deal? And especially in the US, where the country is so polarized by politics for so many different reasons.
Sure.
It was a really wholesome experience to see what society could look like sometimes when people are just like very genuine to each other. And it was more about how are you and who are you versus then like who are you voting for or um, what's your deal, right? So
And when I went back there,
Yeah.
not being a researcher, but just being a participant, I had that transformational experience that I had been writing about others having. And I had that feeling of community and I suddenly got it in a way that I hadn't as a researcher. And
Mhm.
I found this incredible community, and that is can only exist at Burning Man. And um, one thing that Burning Man offers is it just allows people to be in that more expansive space of human connection, and it's really incredible.
Burning Man is this stunning display of what I would say is like my version of heaven on earth, because genuinely people are celebrated in their differentness. And differentness really irks a lot of people in all of the spheres of society. What we do not understand, we judge. And in my experience of like that film, even potentially even more, those scales even more being removed, all I saw was heaven, and yet there are people doing really interesting things that may be very harmful to themselves or others, actually, right? Somewhere on the playa. Um, and yet, if I like what I believe and what I partner with is what I see and what I create around me. And the non-judgment aspect, just like, I get it now. I'm a burner.
As our guest time at Burning Man came to an end, I wondered how the experience had influenced them and what lasting impressions it left. Would they return? What would they do differently next time? Their reflections offer valuable insights into how Burning Man's culture continues to evolve through its participants. It's a living model of how events can inspire ongoing engagement and contribute to cultural development beyond their temporal and spatial boundaries. Let's hear their thoughts on the impact of the event and their future plans.
I'm back already. I'm there already. For me personally, I really want to see the expression of dance out there, activated on the playa more. And so there were some dance camps, but I didn't get to participate as much in them, but I would just love to bring the folks that I, know and develop with and see what they can do and see what we can do and create. So eventually I'd like to see like a team of 20 to 30 professional dancers out there creating an offering. Um, and so I'll start with 5, maybe next year, 5 to 7. And we'll probably combine with the camp that we were with, because you just you need to take it paced. You have to, everybody needs to have the burn experience first, and then you build. It just takes time to build. It's like a lifetime investment. But yeah, I want to come back and do more. I taught a movement workshop out there. I love doing it. And I would want to eventually maybe be a part of like creating a whole movement camp.
that's a big question, right? Like I'm still thinking about it, and my answer is yeah, maybe. Um,
Sure.
like I think I want to go back. That what I've got told, like okay, it gets less expensive the more you go because you buy equipment to begin with in the beginning, and you're just like okay, then like that cost is sort of gone because you've done it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other consideration is I think if I would go again, I would maybe get an e-bike. I had a 1 gear bike, very simple. I had to repair it like twice. There's bike shops all over the playa, and you have to figure things out as you go along. But I can't believe how many miles I rode, and I was quite sore like on Thursday or Friday, and I was just like, man, I didn't even go to the deep playa, like all the way to the trash fence, because I was like, I'm not sure if I'm going to make it back with my bike breaking down and different things like that. So I'm still on the fence. Like I really enjoyed the experience. I think I would go back because I just enjoyed the way people were with each other there.
Wrap up, Rachel provides some insight into Burning Man's significant impact on art and culture, both within the event and in the broader world. She discusses how Burning Man has become a fertile ground for creativity and innovation, influencing not just participants, but also inspiring new approaches to community building and artistic expression globally. Her perspective helped me understand how the event became a catalyst for cultural change and the model for how we might foster creativity and connection in other contexts.
Burning Man it will be remembered in history as one of the most significant cultural phenomenons in the world in terms of creativity and the arts. It is this incredible campus where artists who were rejected from the gallery system, were not conventional artists, could go out there and build these huge structures and burn them and build interactive art and get money from the Burning Man organization. Burning Man is one of the largest funders of arts in California. And then it also became a space for performers and various people to experiment. And I would argue a lot of performers sort of found this new voice. There's a lot of fire performance going on out there. Circus. I have a whole section on dark circus, and a lot of the circus groups that formed out there then went on to become circuses that performed in Los Angeles and Las Vegas. And so for me, it became like a breeding ground for this creativity, for these new forms of art to emerge. And so it's still this incredibly fertile ground for artistic experimentation. And now people, like, if you've shown your work at Burning Man, it's like I've shown my work at the MoMA, or I mean, it's gotten that level of cachet, so much so that the Smithsonian did a whole exhibit called "No Spectators, Please," about the art of Burning Man. And now the artists of Burning Man are being elevated to the level of Smithsonian, right? So there's this very interesting shift where originally Burning Man was a space for the artists who were not accepted by society to be able to make their work. And now society is clamoring to bring that work back into society. And so it's a very interesting shift.
Well, speaking with Rachel, Whitney, and Chris has given me incredible insights into what makes Burning Man more than just an event. It's a living experiment in community, art, and self-expression. It's a place where people come together to co-create a culture that challenges conventional norms and celebrates human potential. Through its unique event model, Burning Man demonstrates how intentional communities can generate profound personal and collective transformations. We find that every festival has fascinating stories like these. Events like Burning Man show us the power of gathering with purpose and how such gatherings can shape our culture in meaningful ways. Be sure to check out our past episodes for more incredible insights into these events that shape our world. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Until next time, this is Daniel Roth with Event Explorer. Stay curious and happy exploring.